Yo, what is up guys, it's Ghost here, welcome back to another video, and in this ultimate guide to Battlefield 6, I'm going to be giving you guys all of the best settings, key bindings, and sensitivity for the game, so that you can really just have the best Battlefield experience, whether you're a vehicle player, an infantry player, or you just want better performance. Hopefully, I can help you out. The settings in this game are quite convoluted. It's difficult to find everything. Multiple settings appear in the same place more than once, so I would recommend just taking the 20-30 minutes, however long this takes, going over your own settings with this video, and then just set it and forget it, and hopefully by the end of things, you'll be done and you won't have to come back again. As always, if you guys enjoy the content here on the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with everything around Battlefield 6. I will keep you guys up to date with all of the news, and I'll have more guides and tutorials just like this one as well. And as always, thank you guys so much for the support. Okay, first things first guys, before we even go into Battlefield 6, you're going to want to go and find this option here. You can just search this, it's called Game Mode. I recommend turning this on, and then come back up here to find a setting and type in GPU scheduling, something like that. Go to your graphics settings, it's under System, Display Graphics, come to Advanced Graphics Settings, and turn on Hardware Accelerated GPU Scheduling. They recommend using this for Battlefield 6 because it really benefits from it. So with that said, we can come into the game and head to the options. Now, we're going to skim over accessibility here because this is basically just where you can find a lot of the settings, so this might be a good place to come back to, you know, after the fact, once you set everything up. So starting with the gameplay tab then, first of all, we have the invert look settings. If we go into edit, and there's going to be like a lot of sub-sections in these option menus, I like to have my aircraft vertical flight, well, inverted there. So I leave this on, I leave the rest off. Obviously, that is personal preference though. If we then come into hold and toggle, there are quite a few ones that I like to change in this. So first of all, crouch, toggle, sprint. I put this on crouch, so this will allow you to crouch and sprint at the same time, which is really nice new feature in Battlefield 6. Crouch slide, I have this set to all, so in Battlefield 6, you can crouch two ways. You can hold control on the keyboard, and that is like your hold crouch, or you can press C to toggle, and this will allow you to slide by either holding control or by double tapping the C key, so I find that really useful. Double tap crouch for sprint slide. If you want, you can turn this on so you have to double press it so you don't do it by accident, but I prefer to have that off. Vehicle boost, I changed this one to hold, so you actually have to hold shift, and when you let go, your vehicle's going to stop boosting. You're not going to, like, you know, overshoot anything there. What else have we got here? Interact and reload, you can choose which one of these you want the game to prioritize. I have it on prioritize interact, but again, that is personal preference. Skip revive and request revive. I changed these both to a toggle, so this is when you die, you can press E on the keyboard to ask for a revive, or you can press spacebar to skip it. This just means you don't bother, you know, having to hold the key the whole time. And then the rest of these I just leave as default. So coming back out of that options menu here, we are now coming down to the infantry section. Infantry aim sensitivity is actually going to be your controller sense. I really think they should add the word controller in there. So I don't use controller, so that's kind of up to you. And really, mouse sensitivity is going to be personal preference as well. I play on 1600 DPI, and I use a sense of 11.4. But again, you know, it depends what you guys use. There's a really good website I'll link you below called mousesensitivity.com, and what you can do is go there, plug in pretty much any other game, and get a translated mouse sensitivity into Battlefield 6. That's what I did to get mine from Battlefield 2042 into this game. Now, you're going to notice with these option menus that we start getting some of the same options in different sections, so it kind of repeats, and that's why it's quite confusing. So in infantry here, you know, we've got crouch, toggle, sprint again, and we've already been over that one. Vault over sprint, this is going to basically like prioritize vaulting over sprinting there. Sprint door barge, this allows you to just sprint into a door, and it will barge open the door there instead of you having to like use the interact key on it. I recommend putting that one to on. Parachute auto deploy, I just have this on skydive and insertions, which is going to apply for the battle royale mainly. But you can change this to always, and then it will like auto deploy your parachute for you. So unless you're prone to crashing against the ground, I would say just leave it like this. Roll the camera in the landing roll. This is like when you jump off somewhere and you press the jump key and your character will like go into a forward roll animation. If you get kind of sick from that or something because of it just like messes up your vision, you can turn this one off. All of the mounting types here, I just leave those as standard, as well as the peaking type. Interactive reload, we've already been over that one. Invert demolition charge, this is kind of an interesting option. You can switch the keys, so by default, it's right-click to place a demolition charge and left-click to detonate it. But if you want to have those reversed, then you can turn this on. Then we have the vehicle section, and again, this is vehicle controller sensitivity. And for mouse, I use 30. I'm not sure if that was the default. I think it was the default, and I've just left it there. Feels pretty good for me on 1600 DPI. These sensitivities here are going to control for the jets and the helicopters respectively. So if you want to increase it or decrease it a little bit, then you can feel free to do that there. Helicopter control assists, I would recommend having off. I would just learn to fly the helicopters as they are. This is going to allow the game to like assist you with your flying. Don't worry, I will be making guides on both the jets and the helicopters on how you guys can fly those and be a little bit more effective. But right from the beginning, I would just say leave that off. Vehicle aim relative controls and decouple tank turret aiming from turning. You want this off and this on. And what these two are going to allow you to do, if you have them set up like this, is you can drive the tank in that direction whilst aiming your camera in that direction. And if you hold forward, the tank will just drive forward. If you have these settings the other way around, then wherever you're looking, the tank will just automatically turn that way and drive that way. So if you want to be able to aim in one direction whilst driving in another, you need to have them set up this way, really. Vehicle boost, again, we've already been over that. As for aim assist here, like, this is, of course, going to come down to, like, controller players. I'll be the first one to put on my hands and say I don't know the first thing about playing on a controller in Battlefield, so if you guys are looking for those kind of settings specifically, I won't really be able to help you out there, but hopefully you'll find some of the other stuff helpful. Then we've got the campaign tab, and this is, of course, a new tab, although it doesn't really have anything in here. You've got like your difficulty, you've got like the HUD and stuff like that. It's all pretty self-explanatory. Then we've got controller, so if you want to change your controller bindings, I don't know if people generally do this on controller. Maybe if you've got the 4 buttons at the back there, the extra ones, you can bind things to those. But we're going to go onto mouse and keyboard here. So again, you'll see here that the sensitivity pops up once again, but let's go into control settings here because there are a couple of important ones. So first off, uniform infantry aiming, previously known as uniform soldier aiming, I think it was. I like to have this on, but I put the coefficient at 0, and I used to have the coefficient at 133, which I believe is the default and has always been the default in Battlefield games. So if you are like me and you used to use this at 133, try turning it to 0, but having it still on. I found that this gives me the most reliable, the most consistent mouse sensitivity there. As for the other settings here, I just kind of leave these as default. Field of view, I play personally at 120, which equates as 89. This new game uses a horizontal field of view. Previous Battlefield games used a vertical setting. And of course, again, this is personal preference. Movement here, we've been over all of these. I have most of these as default. You can set, if you want, a separate input binding for slide. So maybe, if you're a controller player and you don't want to slide with crouch, you could map one of your back buttons there to, be your slide button. That's maybe kind of a good idea. Then we come down to the zoom section. And again, I don't really mess with this stuff. You can set up individual sensitivities for every single zoom in the game if you want to. Me personally, I don't do that. I just kind of rely on my base sensitivity to keep things as consistent as possible. All of these, again, we've kind of been over here, I believe. It's kind of weird that they keep bringing them up again and again, but I digress. Okay, next up, we are going to get into key bindings. So for infantry, the only one I change here is I like to put the big map on tab, and then I change and put the scoreboard on M. I just find it more useful to have the big map there. And I do this for all the vehicles as well, by the way, so I can pull up that big map and see, what's going on the battlefield. Okay, let's see. Control settings here. We've been over that. We've been over those, of course. Oh, right. Third-person aircraft camera roll. I recommend having this on unless you get kind of like seasick, or I guess airsick. Then you might want to have it off if you get dizzy. This basically is going to like roll the jet or the camera around the jet as you're you know, rolling the jet in the sky. If you have it off, then the camera is going to stay pretty much perpendicular to the floor. Uniform vehicle aiming, I like to have this one on here. And then we've got this setting, vertical mouse aim ratio. So this means that your aim ratio on the vertical scale here is only going to be 48% of your horizontal aim. And that makes sense because when you're turning a tank turret, you want to be able to turn left and right much quicker than you can go up or down, as a real-life tank would be. So 48 is pretty good for me. If you put it closer to 100%, then it's going to be, you know, if it's at 100, it's like a 1-to-1. So, you know, feel free to experiment around with that, but I have it at 48. We've been over all of these, I believe. Oh, here we've got tank aim sensitivity, gunner aim sensitivity, and then transport vehicle free look sensitivity. So again, just like with the jets and helis, you can tune those if you like, but I just kind of leave them there. And then we've got a few key bindings there as well. And now we come down to the key bindings for all the vehicles. So again, if we just go in here, you can see I do this for every single category. I put the big map on tab, and I put the scoreboard on M. Outside of that, there's a couple I change in helicopter. Well, there's one I change here. I change exit vehicle to B on the keyboard, because if you're frantically trying to fly the helicopter, and this goes for the jet as well, and stay alive, it's very easy to hit the E key by accident, and it's kind of embarrassing if you bail out mid-air. So I just change that to B. If we come down to aircraft here, I do the same thing. Now, the other big one for the aircraft is going to be pitching up and pitching down. And what I like to do is bind spacebar to pitch up and left alt to pitch down. So instead of having to swipe the mouse constantly across the mouse pad like this when I'm dogfighting somebody, you can just hold spacebar and use the mouse for fine-tuning and aiming. Now, you might say, Ghost, why do you have then pitch down on space instead of pitch up? The reason is that if your flying in the jets is inverted, you need to reverse these. So you actually want pitching up to be on space and pitching down to be on left alt. But if you fly inverted like I do, then you want it set up this way. Other than that, there is nothing too crazy here in the keybinds. We've got UI keybinds. I actually just leave those as default. Mouse raw input, of course, you definitely want that on. And that is going to bring us to the graphics options here. Now, we're just going to skip over the quality settings for the time being, but we will come back to those. World brightness and UI brightness, I leave them at 50. I put sharpness at 20. Again, that's personal preference. Coming into advanced here, we will, of course, disable the frame rate limiter. I just had that on for the sake of recording this video. Fixed resolution scale, you'll want that at 100. NVIDIA reflex low latency, I put it at enabled, over enabled and boost. And then DLSS, if you have an NVIDIA GPU, DLSS is great at quality mode, especially if you've got one of the new 5000 series ones. If you don't, then I would recommend XeSS, then I would go for FSR, and then if you're not using DLSS at all, you could go for like TAA, but hopefully most of you have DLSS because it is really, really nice. Extra performance, and it just looks fantastic. We'll come back to frame generation in a couple of minutes. Future frame rendering, I leave this off. And then performance overlay, it's quite nice to have it simple up here. If you wonder what these numbers mean, the first one there is basically how many frames your CPU is allowing you to output. The GPU one here shows how many frames your GPU is outputting. So you can see from my situation that I am actually bottlenecked by my CPU. My GPU could be further increasing my frame rate, but my GPU is kind of, my CPU is kind of maxed out. Okay, so let's exit out of there. Camera settings here, again, we've been over field of view. Weapon field of view, this is going to change, like, how big your gun model and your soldier's arms are in the game. It doesn't really change like ADS, FOV, or anything like that. So I would recommend having this on wide. If you have it on narrow, it's going to make that model a little bit larger and just give you like less screen real estate. Weapon motion blur and world motion blur, I turn these down to 0. I just don't like any extra motion blur. Same thing with camera shake, I turn it down to the minimum. And then all of these four these are sort of like cinematic effects that you can put on if you want, you know, well, the game to be more cinematic, maybe kind of realistic. I don't know. I prefer to have all of those off, and I recommend you do the same. Borderless and full screen doesn't really matter. It doesn't have any major impact on performance, at least not for me. Of course, you want your max resolution, you want your max refresh rate, and I recommend having vertical sync off. Now, coming back up here to the quality options, this is kind of going to be like a pretty personal thing because it really depends on your rig and what kind of system you have. For me, I've got a 5090 and I'm bottlenecked by my CPU, and I think most of you will probably be bottlenecked by your CPUs as well. So I've been able to get away with pretty high graphical settings. If I turn all this stuff down to low, I don't really get extra frame rate because, again, it's the CPU. But that being said, there are a few areas that I would definitely look in, whatever kind of GPU you've got, or especially if you're actually bottlenecked by your GPU instead of your CPU. So the first one here is mesh quality that I turned down. And actually turning this from overkill to high netted me about 20 to 25 extra frames. Turning it down to low doesn't really seem to do much, so I leave that one on high. Undergrowth quality is another one that is high on GPU usage. I leave it on high, but even if it doesn't really give you any extra frames, you might want it just for visibility's sake, so you don't have, more grass or like people hiding in grass. That being said, there's not really a lot of grass on the maps in Battlefield 6, so I just left it on high for that reason. Effects quality, this one you can see has a high impact on CPU and GPU. So what this means is that if there are effects going off on screen like explosions and whatnot, you could find that you get some bad 1% lows, and if you're experiencing that, you might want to turn this down to low. For me, even with all this stuff maxed out, my GPU is still at like 85-90%, so I've got some headroom whenever explosions do occur, so I just leave that on high. Then you've got volumetric quality. This is going to change like God rays from the sun and the light coming through, like illuminating dust and debris and clouds and snow. It's kind of going to like give you a lot less visibility in the game. So if you have trouble seeing people, it might actually be worthwhile turning this down to low. But in terms of performance for me, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. But again, if you maybe don't have quite as high end of a GPU, that's probably one to look at turning down. Now, the next big one is sun shadow quality. This was massive. I turned this down all the way from overkill to medium. I don't find it had it didn't really make the game look much worse, but I gained about 30 FPS from this one. So it really hits your CPU and your GPU pretty hard. And then the other big one is screen space, AO, and GI. I had this originally on the highest setting here, SSGI high. I've turned it all the way to off because, again, it got me about 30 FPS. It doesn't say here, but it really hammers both your GPU and your CPU. And then the final one is high fidelity objects. As you can see, high on the CPU. For whatever reason, for me, it doesn't seem to have a big effect if I turn it down to medium or even low. But if you're suffering from low frame rates and whatnot, I would look at turning that one down as well. Okay, let's talk about frame gen as we're here in the test range. So I'm getting, as you can see, about 250 FPS in here. And frame gen kind of gets a bad rap, I feel, and it's because it increases input latency. The thing is, if you're already getting like 250 frames, so your input latency is already very low, and you can see up there it's 1.5 milliseconds apparently for me, turning on frame gen to 2x here, if you've already got a base frame rate of that high, it's not really going to change it that much. Like, you're not going to feel the major increase in latency because your base frame rate is already high enough. And now you can see with 2x, I'm getting like 350 FPS. I have a 480 Hz monitor, so that change may be worth it to you. Obviously, if you don't have a super high refresh rate monitor, or you really care about input latency and you want to eke out the last 0.1 milliseconds of input latency, and placebo or not, if you think that matters to you, then you can leave this off. Personally, it's kind of a catch-22 because my frame rate is already high enough as it is. I don't really need the extra frames. So for that reason, I leave it off. But if you're on like a 5070 Ti, it may be worth turning it on for you. It depends. Do you want that trade-off of smoother gameplay with, a minimal increased input latency? But again, I would say if you only have a base frame rate of like 60, then you probably want to leave this off. Okay, with that said, that brings us to interface and HUD here. So you want to have all of this stuff on. Infantry HUD motion and vehicle HUD motion I turn off because it's just, a little bit jarring. The SOVIS filter, for people who don't know what this is, it's soldier visibility. It kind of like illuminates soldiers a little bit better in the world for visibility's sake. I recommend having that one on. Advanced HUD settings. I like to have show kills made for squad and nearby. You can have the kill feed to be everybody, but I just feel like this gives you a little bit more information about, what's going on around you. Minimap size, I have that on large. I put the opacity all the way to 100. The rest of the stuff here is default. Unfortunately here, this is like the distance in meters of how much the minimap is going to display, whether you're on foot, in a ground vehicle, or in an air vehicle. Unfortunately, you can't really fine-tune these, and there is no keybind in-game to change these on the fly, which is a bit of an oversight in my opinion. I think DICE really need to come in and rectify that. As for the rest of the options here, I just leave all of these at default personally, but oh no, there is one more thing here. Show compass multiplayer. You can turn this on, and it might actually be on as default now, but it was off in the beta. But this will show you the compass, and you can actually see people who are spotted in-game where they're firing, even though they're not on your minimap. So you can still see like the direction that they're in, so that is quite handy. Other than that, you can play around with your vehicle HUD colors here. Then down here under icons and indicators, you can change the icon intensity here, so we just make them kind of like glow a little bit more, I suppose. I think Lopar is wanting some dinner or something. Going into HUD icons, you can actually change the size and opacity of all of the individual icons in the game. Now, I don't mess with too many things here, but one of the things I do change if we come to friendly icons is when you're zoomed in. So when you're ADSing, down your gun, I change friendly icons opacity to 50%. And the same with the friendly revive icons. And then I also do it here for the squad revive icons. And the reason for that is if you're ADSing somebody, sometimes, especially with max FOV, it can be hard to see enemies. And if you have like a large icon of a friendly who is downed and they're waiting to be revived, it can almost entirely block the enemy soldier. So that's why I turn that down. This, again, it kind of comes down to what your setup is like, what size monitor do you have, what is your resolution like, how far away do you sit from the game, like are you playing on a large TV or whatever. These are something you're going to have to tinker around with and change them for however you want them, but you can change the scale of the icons here as well. So for example, if the enemy icons aren't big enough, then you could make them larger. And then coming back out and going into crosshairs and indicators, again, you can mess around with like crosshair intensity, and you can sort of see there on the right, like what this intensity setting does. I guess it just kind of gives them like a drop shadow. But for me, I just leave everything here on default. Again, with all the colors here, if you're maybe colorblind or something, you can change some of these to be something a little bit more visual for you there. And then here we have this hit indication numbers. This is actually quite cool. So at the moment, as default, the hit indication is just to the left of the crosshair, but you can actually give it like a different horizontal and vertical offset. You can change the opacity here. You can change the size of the numbers. It's small by default, but you could have it large if you're, again, like really far away from your TV. So I think these are some really nice additions here as well. And then coming back out of that menu and down to chat here, we've got chat visibility. I like to have this as when active, so when somebody speaks in the chat, it will display, otherwise it'll be hidden. If we go into chat settings, you can change like the opacity of the chat window. You can put like, you can make it huge if you want. You can make it take up the entire screen almost, and you can mess around with like the, horizontal, vertical position, etc. So I've gone ahead and reset this category here because I think it's just fine as it is. Audio, it's really down to you. I sometimes play with the music off because it can get a bit distracting, let's say, at the end of a round, but totally understand for anybody who wants to have it on. The game does have very good music this time around. For configuration, I find that headphones and high dynamics is the best one for me. That gives you the biggest dynamic range between quiet sounds and loud sounds. I do have quite a high-end pair of Sennheiser headphones here. And so it really depends on your sound setup. Like, are you using a 7.1 speaker surround system? Well, then you probably want to select that here. And, you know, it just depends what you find sounds the best. A lot of people say that for footsteps, War Tape's VAL is better. But I just find that it kind of muddies the entire mix, even though it does sound, you know, quite impressive at the same time. Voice chat, of course, all of this is like personal preference. There is a new option here, like voice chat position. So if you have this in world, you can actually like hear where the person is standing and where they're speaking to you from. And then here in accessibility, you can, if you want, turn down the sound effects volume for tinnitus. So tinnitus is like the ringing that you get in your ears when a large explosion goes off, and you can even reduce the frequency here. Like, you can pick the frequency and then turn that frequency down if you find that you know, particularly jarring for your ears. Other than that, though, I think most of the stuff here is default. Oh, let's just go over this in system. You can actually uninstall various sections of the game. So let's say you're done with the campaign, you're not going to play it again. You can just click this, and presumably, I haven't tried it yet, it will like uninstall that for you. Here you've got streamer mode and anonymous mode. So streamer mode, this will hide the IDs of everyone else on your team or in the game with you, and anonymous mode will hide your ID and basically change your name to like a bot name. So this probably doesn't apply to most people, but it is there. And then right down at the bottom here, there is actually quite a useful one in system. It's called Network Graph. And if you put this on, it will display like a little widget in game, and it shows all of the rounds, like the bullets that you fire, which one of them hit the enemy. Basically, if you're having problems with your ping in the game and the netcode and it registering things, you can see a lot more details and information by enabling this graph. But, you know, most of the time, you'll probably want to have it off because it is quite intrusive. And that is about it, guys. We've got the credits there, and that's the end of the lengthy options. I know this was a long one, but like I said at the start of the video, I do recommend just taking the time, you know, going through everything, trying out all the graphical settings. Of course, you guys are probably not going to have the exact same setup as I have, so, you know, maybe try changing all the graphic settings to low, put them back up to high or medium, and what you want to try and do there is make it so your GPU and your CPU are outputting near enough the same frame limit. So, you know, if you're in my situation where your CPU bottlenecked and your GPU still has a lot of, you know, free frames to work with, then feel free to turn up some of your graphical settings, but those are the ones that I recommend. Nevertheless, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope it was helpful to somebody out there. If it was, leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with everything Battlefield. There'll be plenty more news videos and tutorials to come from me here on the channel. And thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.